or do something to you, you don't even know why you're in it. You're just still in vigilant interaction. This is where people start feeling anxiety. They feel anxiety so often because they're not actually feeling and expressing the emotion because they're not connected to it. In my experience, anxiety isn't an emotion. It's the inability to fully experience, connect with, and then express what's actually there.
The human energy system is extremely complex, but you may be aware of aspects of it, such as the energy centers of your body. What's less known about is that we need to actively work on our energy system as much as we seek emotional support and develop our self-regulation practices. As we continue this series in understanding our layers of personal mastery, the next profound teacher featured is Dr. John Amaral, and he says, the physical body is like the printout. Our energetic levels are the electrical signals that sends information and creates that printout. Freeing ourselves from the patterns and past that no longer serves us requires a multi-dimensional approach, including the physical, the emotional, the energetic, and the spiritual levels. And with that awareness, today we're going to look at energy and the energetic nature in which our emotions are made. So in today's video, you're going to learn what our energy field is. You're going to learn why we become disconnected from our body and energetic layers. You're going to learn how working with our energy can create a powerful release, and you're going to see a real life example from Dr. John Amaral. And finally, you're going to learn 3 steps in how to work and release trapped energy within your body. If you're new to my channel, please click the button and click the bell so you'll be notified each and every week when I release new content. So when you've done that, let's dive straight into this fascinating topic with Dr. John Amaral. I'm Richard Hussaini, coach, and here to support you along your path to personal mastery. And one of the most challenging aspects of personal mastery is influencing our thoughts, feelings, and actions. I'm now 6 years into working with energy, and I have to admit that before that I was very dismissive of it and I didn't give it much time. I was very naive and locked into my identity working with Olympic athletes and coaching Olympic athletes. It's only death and grief within my life that has woken me up to doing new things. And now my experience with it myself, as well as working with others, has shown me what a profound tool energy work is. So on to part 1 of today's video. What is our energy field? When you start to look at the energy system and you start to experience it, you get to see how incredible it really is. And it's made up of multiple different things, so electromagnetic, acoustic, and sort of subtle energy fields. And the reason I draw your attention to Dr. John Amaral is because he has a really wonderful way of describing it.
Fields. We know that there are fields that are organizing how neurons fire in the brain, right? It's not just like electrical and biochemical interactions. There are whole regions of the brain that fire off together in synchrony. And there's a field effect. There's an organizing field that has information. And then there's a response in the physical world. So a magnet's a great example. You can hold a magnet over a bunch of pieces of iron, little iron filings, and it will move them. It doesn't physically touch. But there is a response in the physical 3D world to it's a force. The field has a force associated with it. So there's a magnetic field that moves things. Every time you mess up those iron filings and you put that same magnet over them again, they always align up in the same pattern. Something's organizing how physical structure and physical matter is going to be shaped, and how we heal, how we regrow, basically how everything happens in the physical world is organized by fields.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, if you boil water and you hit a threshold of 212 degrees is where it boils, it's H2O, but it turns into a vapor at 212 at that threshold. If you drop the temperature down at 32 Fahrenheit, you're going to freeze it. It's still H2O, but the structure changes because the energy state of that H2O is in a different level, and at that level it functions differently as a 3-dimensional structure. In the body is actually technically a liquid crystalline structure. It means the fascial network, so all the collagen fibers and the fascia that organizes and kind of keeps like the grid of your body together, it transfers information in the form of acoustic waves. It's electromagnetic, it's biochemical, it's electrical. There's all this communication going on, neuropeptides. But in the fascial network, it's been found that these Swedish researchers found that there's acoustic waves as solitons, which is basically like a tsunami.
You may or may not already have a sense of this. You may be able to perceive those subtle qualities that are around us and with us all the time. You know, it's undeniable that there is a level of self-organization within the body. You only have to study the body a little bit to see and realize that. The healing process, you know, how our body regenerates all of the time without our conscious awareness. There's something regulating that, the way our body is built and made and the way it heals and our immune function. Well, I love the work by neuroscientist David Eagleman, which I'm going to feature in another video. But just to touch on it, he looks at how different animals perceive reality through different lenses. Now, an example of that would be the bat. The bat uses acoustic wave to navigate through life. A tick uses temperature and butyric acid. And so the understanding that different animals perceive reality through different lenses. And so they're perceiving that level of perception is called an Umwelt. And that's German for the surrounding world or the realm that our sense can perceive. Now I want to link back to the video I did with Dr. Gabor Mate and around the perception of reality. And he said that we don't respond to what happens, we respond to our perception of what happens. And that perception is based on trauma and the events that we've been through within our life. And so the way we see through the world, we only perceive one level, one light octave, one equivalent of light octave on the whole spectrum of light that's available. Think of ultraviolet, think of all the different lights that we can't perceive through our normal eye. And we process 120 bits of information per second. And so you're using half of that right now, as you're avidly listening to me, to decode what I'm saying. Yet our retina is picking up 11 million bits of information per second. You know, are you aware of the changes in temperature when you eat food? Are you aware of the digestive process happening within your body? Now, tuning into all of that information wouldn't be useful to us all the time. It would just be overwhelming. There'd just be so much. So we get a kind of a tunnel vision and select the information that's relevant and salient to us. But whatever we're paying attention to, it's important to know that there are other levels within our Umwelt.
Levels or layers of the energy system is kind of like those nested Russian dolls that are like inside of each other, where the physical body would be the densest layer, and then there's a shell and another shell and another shell. I'm interacting, my field and her field are interacting. I mean, HeartMath has done some research on this where you're looking at you can have dissonance or you can have coherence in your own field and someone else's, and you can go in sync with their heart rhythm. Your brain waves can sync up or entrain to their heart rhythm, and the person whose heart actually is more coherent, it's in a more coherent rhythm, and they're more connected, they will entrain or they will bring along the person who's less coherent into their field, and they will start to entrain them to their frequency.
I love that analogy where he said about the Russian dolls and kind of the layers upon layers that surround our body and kind of come out. Now, if you're not used to practicing that, that's a difficult thing to perceive initially. But with practice, you can tune into that. And I definitely underline what he said about the HeartMath Institute. It's really worth checking them out. They've studied the heart for around 25 years and really the intelligence of the heart. But our hearts give off an electromagnetic wave around several feet outside of our body. And that wave can be either coherent or incoherent. An incoherent heart wave is when we're feeling emotions such as fear, anger, or resentment. You know, that wave is unorganized, it's jagged, it's disrupted. When we feel emotions such as love and gratitude and appreciation, our heart wave is coherent. So those waves are very, very organized, they're smooth. I like that to when you throw a pebble in a very still pond, you'll see the ripples out. And it's exactly that, they're nicely organized, they're smooth. That's the same with our heart wave. And we have this field that comes out, our torus field that comes out of our body and around. And so that, you know, initially that might be quite difficult to sense, but we can affect that. We can affect that with self-regulation practices, and we can affect the people around us. Now, whether you have an experience of this, but if you've walked in a room after people have an argument, no words need to be said, but you can sense there's this palpable feeling of something has happened. And that's what you're picking up on, the energetic layers of that event that's happened. The same as when you're around someone, you either resonate with someone, you like to be around with someone, or someone just gives you a funny feeling. It's the same thing, that resonance of energy layers is what you're picking up on. So on to part 2 of today's video, how energy affects our body. Our emotional system has to move energy somehow. And to do that, we have to develop a sense of awareness with what's going on within our body, not just within our mind, but within our body and within the energetic layers around us.
The body can be in vigilance and protection from early on, and some people don't even have a reference for what it's like to be in flow. They never have felt truly ease and peace and flow and expansion and energy flowing because the body's been in a hypervigilant state since they were born, and they have no referencing for even what could be possible. And I found that along the way, so many human beings, and this was my own experience, because I had very severe eczema and asthma and allergies and all these reactive things happening in my body growing up. And I was treated with injections for years. I was given asthma inhalers. I was giving cortisone creams, corticosteroids. So I was being treated from the outside in because my body was reacting to the environment. But my body was reacting to the environment because what I realized in my journey was because I was feeling strong feelings and experiences that but I wasn't connected to what I was feeling. So I couldn't associate and have a dialogue or a relationship with my inner world, with my body and its sensations and feedback. So it was numb inside. I was numb.
How connected are you to your internal awareness and sensations? Because without that internal awareness, we, as he said, lose connection. And I love that description of numb. We become numb to what's going on around us, and we get stuck behind our eyes, within our head, and completely disconnected from our body. And if we get stuck in our mind, we get stuck in those endless narrative stories of limiting beliefs and depression. And when we're stuck in that, we just address the symptoms of what's going on and not the root cause. In a previous video, we've looked at limiting beliefs from Dr. Gabor Mate's point of view, where he looks at uncovering triggers as the archaeology of the mind, where you look at the symptom and you gently dust off to get the root cause of why that trigger has happened. The trigger is a symptom of a deeper pain we feel, normally from an event that's happened back in childhood. I've also done a video looking at emotions from a physiological point of view and Lisa Feldman Barrett's work. She asks us to be the architect of our mind because our brains make emotions from the feelings within our body. If you've not seen either of those videos, there are links below that you can click on and watch after this one. Illness is simply a disconnection from our true self and all that is happening. And the cause of that is our inability to express the energy from stress.
So many of the things that people have going on are related to energy that's been bound in the body as redirected energy. And how it works is the mechanism is fight or flight. So we know from all the research that high stress in the system in your body that isn't being resolved or dealt with is tied into everything, right? Every kind of disease process, from heart disease to diabetes to anxiety. I mean, there's pretty much stress that's not being handled or dealt with or resolved in some way, shape, or form.
One of the key takeaways for me is the unresolved nature of stress and emotions. Our culture defines us in the sense of what is acceptable and what is not, and how we're just all used to repressing, generally speaking, repressing how we feel. That could be in the moment, that could be in a meeting, that could be in a traffic jam, where we feel a sense of something's happened and we keep it in within us, we don't express. Now my 3-year-old daughter is an incredible teacher, and to see someone in their true state, in our true state, where emotions will just rush straight through and come out, that could be anger, that could be fear, that could be complete joy. It's completely embodied in every single part of her, and it comes out of her, and then she returns to baseline. And we lose that as an adult because of, like I said, the cultural aspects to how we live. But there are specific reasons why stress, and particularly the energy around stress, causes problems.
Don't express the sound that's natural and authentic, and we can't always do that in every context. That's what, because culture, you're in the boardroom, you're in a meeting, whatever, and you want to just freak out. You just want to freak out, and you're like, I got to hold it together, got to be fine, and then like finally you kind of get over it, suck it up, and then you go home and have a glass of wine, have a cigarette, eat some food, and just kind of suppress it. So the energy that was triggered in the fight or flight response, where you 10-step, the spinal cord stretched, the tone of all the tissues of the body stretched, the whole nervous system stretched, the tone we call it, of all the nerve tissues of the body, which are interwoven into every cell. So you have like somewhere in the vicinity of like 3 to 9 little filament nerve fibers that weave into the outer matrix of the cell. and through the fascia, and everything's interconnected with this nerve tissue, they all get stretched. And you get a tonal shift. So you get a vibratory change in the frequency of the body, literally. Not just like Abraham Hicks, like, you know, like it's a sort of everything's vibration. It's a physical, visceral change in the vibratory tone of the body.
So that repression, there's an activation that happens with our nervous system. Our nervous system contracts, our body contracts when we're under stress. You know, thinking of those different biochemical, electromagnetic, those acoustic levels, there are significant changes within the tissues. And so add a little bit more of a layer, this is how energy gets trapped within our body.
One of the reasons that happens is like I was talking earlier about this, like waves, these acoustic waves, there's tone, there's vibrations moving through the connective tissues of the body. And what I've found is that when we adapt and go into fight or flight, we're building up tension. Well, tension is just energy that's not moving freely in the system. Now it's bound in the tendons. Now it's bound in the muscles. Now it's bound in the pericardium. Now it's bound in the viscera around the muscles. Now it's bound up in the cartilage in the knee. So you can store energy that you can't deal with effectively at that time. It should be discharged as sound and movement, which is what emotion is. So you can have a strong feeling, but until you have vibration of those tissues, until you have some kind of movement and some kind of tone or sound, it doesn't have to be a loud sound, but there has to be some oscillation of those tissues. The higher brain can't register that as emotion. So it's like suppressed energy that's literally, we could call it a standing wave. You've taken a wave of energy that would be moving and you've compressed it into a small region.
So I love that description. And for me, that's adding a really another profound layer to really how to diffuse all of these layers and understand and release all of these layers within us. So when we look at Dr. Gabor Mate, we have a childhood event which creates a trauma, which then informs our present moment, because that becomes the trigger, or the trigger is the symptom to that past trauma. Dr. John Amaral is saying, well, that trauma gets stored in our body as energy. It gets bound up in our tissues. And then Lisa Feldman Barrett says, well, the brain is interpreting that stuck energy and creating the emotions. And so these three levels, to me anyway, is starting to really show a pathway and a collaboration of how to address and release the parts of us that no longer serve us. Energy doesn't have to be bound up from significant trauma. It can be bound up from day-to-day lives. And it requires our internal awareness to tune into that. And so if you look at your pelvic floor and thinking about your pelvic floor, how often is it truly supple versus how often is there a mild contraction within that? And if you look at the pelvic floor, it's our base, our root energy center, and it's where we feel safe and secure in the world. And so if you're bound up and kind of a mild contraction through that on a chronic level, chronic being hours of the day, day to day, that's your normal state, then those tissues are bound up, and so energy won't flow through that. Energy being those vibrations, those acoustic sounds, those electromagnetic waves, they can't flow through tissue very well when there's a chronic tone or chronic tension. To see the direct effect between what we think and how we feel in our body, if we're perceiving a sense of anxiety within our mind, we hold that in our body through a contraction. There's a physical nature that's responding to that thought within our mind. And so we can't separate consciousness or awareness from our body. It's completely one unit. So on to part 3 of today's video. How working with the energetic levels can create powerful release. And you're going to see a real life example of Dr. John Amaral working. We're all told that we need to eat well, we need to exercise, we need to do breathwork meditation and a whole host of other practices to maintain good well-being and to be in the best condition possible. But what I see so often is there's a disconnection between doing the practices and embodying what they actually do to someone. And you know, I've been guilty of that in my past. Going through the motions of what I know with my mind is good for me and is going to benefit me, but I had no connection to that at all with the visceral nature of that. That showed up for me in the sense of doing all these things, but having a sense of something was missing, something wasn't quite right. Only when I practiced tuning into my body, into the visceral layers, did I realize what I needed versus what my mind wanted. And there's a big difference between what my mind wants, what that push and that drive is to maybe soothe, versus what do I actually need. Now in my case, my mind wanted to continually, for example, in exercise, push hard and hard and hard. My body didn't need that. My body needed to rest and recover. And so in in my recent years, that's one of the big things that I've learned to tune into.
I feel like is the crux of a big part of the work that I'm doing, is that it's a paradox. It's this paradox of changing any patterns. I call it the paradox of change. So if you try to change something that you're not connected to, you don't have the power to truly transform the situation, because you don't even know, in a way, what truly needs to happen. You're just trying to just do something different. So I've got my yoga, I've got my my meditation, the processes that I'm doing. I'm working out. I'm eating mostly, very, paleo. I'm eating almost vegan. I'm fasting. I'm doing the detoxes. I'm doing the cleanses. I'm eating really clean food. I'm having, maybe even talking to a therapist. I'm really like engaging with my friends. I'm fine. And there's still like a sense of like something missing. There's a loss or a void or a feeling of like something's off. Something's not, like, why am I doing all the right stuff? And there's just something that is elusive. I don't feel ease. I don't feel peace. And that happens when we are disconnected from a part of us that it's hard to be with. And achievers, it's usually hard to be with what feels hopeless, helpless, where we feel not enough, where we feel like nothing works, or we feel like it's never going to end, and we feel like we just can't. And so instead of like just fully immersing ourselves and fully feeling that for a moment, and then we pop out the other side of it, which is like whatever we're fully with, without a judgment or attempt to changes. That's the paradox. Because you're so with it that now you're one with the experience, and suddenly it's something else. You're transforming. So if we can't do that, then we layer all this other stuff on it, and then we try to like fix. But if we can be with it, and like I might have to locate that place in my body, feel where it is. It's like, maybe it's your heart, and you just take a breath there, and you're like, it feels like heavy, it feels intense, it feels overwhelming. You're like, oh, this is so, and if you really connect and you feel the vibration and the energy there, and you made the sound, it would be like, oh, no. Like, we don't want to make that angsty tone or that vibration, because our brain is like, no, we're not that weak person. It sucks. It's not fun to feel that. No, nobody wants to feel it, especially achievers. They don't want to feel, I don't want to feel hopeless. I'm going to do everything I can to be in a resourceful state to connect into higher, resources and energies. And I'm going to do everything I can to feel, empowered and connected. But sometimes I'm going to slip into a feeling of like, why is this happening? And it's like, I got to let myself go there. I got to let myself scan and feel, where is that anchored in my system, energetically and physically? And is it where for you might it be? Is it your heart? Is it your throat? Is it in your head? Do people get headaches, or people get like, oh, it feels like this compression on my chest. It feels like an elephant on my chest, that heaviness. And it's like, that could be grief, or that could be like just a feeling of like fear that you don't have a reason to even be feeling mentally, but just a sense of just like uncertainty that is there, and so all this energy is built up. It's literally a charge in the body where the tissues can't move freely. They're actually holding energy.
If we don't express it, we aren't completing that loop. How often have you, aware, knowingly kind of squashed emotions, repressed emotions, rather than completing that loop? And this next example is a really powerful description of what can happen when we do allow ourselves to complete the loop of that energetic cycle.
Working with someone who had a whiplash accident, this happened many times with a specific case. The man I was working with, he was in a whiplash accident. He pulled out of his driveway, someone rear-ended him, and his lower neck went into spasm, and then he went in and got an MRI, and it was a ruptured disc. And I saw him about 2 years after this happened, and he was going to all these chiropractors and alternative practitioners and acupuncture, and he had cortisone injections. He had done everything. And they were looking for a mechanical solution because he had a blown ruptured disc, and he had all this pain, and he had all this tension. And the first thing I asked him was, what was going on around the time that happened? Like, what was happening in your life when you did? Just curious, because I want to get a context. And he said, You know what? I peeled out of the driveway. I had just had a huge fight with my ex-wife, and it was literally the night when we separated and we never got back together. And he's like, wow, you know, like I never even put that together, that this physical thing happened right at a time of high emotional intensity. And his nervous system, his limbic system, his whole architecture of his body was still holding around a trauma that was way beyond just the physical experience. And so when we started to work, I went in and I just did a couple ounces of pressure in his lower neck, and everything started releasing. He started to breathe, and he started to like growl, and he started to rage, and all of a sudden like rage was coming out of him, and then sadness was coming out of him, and he was raging for a moment, and then he was just sobbing, and then his shoulders dropped and his whole body released, and all of a sudden he was like, he was doing this, and his clunk, his vertebrae were adjusting, and he was resolving a pattern. Now, did I go in and specifically fix that disc? No. Like, I helped him, one, recognize there's a relationship between your life and this pattern that's your body, which isn't a static thing that's mechanical and separate from your consciousness and everything going on. And then I helped to kind of point out that here's a way you could be more self-aware and self-reflective and start to like move that energy yourself. And I found over the years that like that lower neck and throat area is so tied into so oftentimes like relational challenges, anger, loss of trust in intimacy, and loss of like preparation and vigilance of like, I'm not going to be screwed over again. I'm going to hold this like this so I'm not vulnerable. It's also around the throat area, which in the Vedic tradition and the yogic tradition is the fifth chakra, or the Vishuddhi they call it, which is that like your kind of your higher expression of your higher voice.
This is where the experience of energy work is there's no substitute for it. You can hear the description of it all the time, but until you feel that, you feel the process of energy work, you feel of what's going on, and ultimately you feel what happens. You know, a powerful description by Dr. John Amaral then. In my own experience, my body moves, it convulses, it's just a powerful expression of movement. My mind, I'm not related to the story where that's coming from, but it's just a release of emotion through my body. My body is moving in waves, very hard sometimes. To give you a visual of this, whether you've watched it or not, the Goop Lab series on Netflix, you'll see a real life example now of an example of that, a type of movement that the body does when energy is being liberated.
Emotion happens in your head. It actually happens in the sites on our body. And so when I'm working on people and I'm working with, and we say energy starts moving and they start releasing, how emotion expresses is through movement and sound.
There was this one moment last year when John was actually working around my foot, and I got angry, and then I just had such deep sadness, and it was actually a memory that I had, and it was connected to a trauma that happened to me when I was 10 that I hadn't even thought of for 20 years. At 10 years old, my parents went through a pretty aggressive divorce, and I lived with my dance coaches. It was not the best living situation, and so I had this like really just pissed off anger, like literally attached like in my foot, basically. This method works incredibly well for me because it helps me experience and go back to things and be able to shift them.
Whatever you're thinking about that now, if you've had energy work, you'll know a sense of that. There'll be a connection to that. If you haven't had energy work at all, you know, I feel it's a time now to open awareness up, especially if you're looking into developing along personal mastery. You're learning to understand your thoughts, feelings, and actions. It's such a huge part to that if you don't look into it, you're potentially missing a huge area of release and of a profound tool to use within your toolbox of personal mastery. Chiropractic world talks about the body and the convulsing as unwinding. And as I link to my experience, that's certainly what I go through, an unwinding of my body when I allow my body to express itself in the way it needs to. And so moving on to part 4, the final part of today's video, 3 steps to release energy from your body. Energy work doesn't have to be as dramatic as what you've just seen or the story that I've described about myself. And so the first place to start, step one, is really developing an awareness of your internal world, your interoception. And the first place to start with that is beginning a body scan practice. If you've not done one before, there's a guided 20-minute one below that you can click the link and follow after this video. But simply being, the body scan is about bringing awareness into different areas of your body. And the video will guide you through, from your feet, through your legs, and through the rest of your body. And just being curious what you sense. You're coming away from behind your eyes and you're coming into your body. So feelings, what are you perceiving? And most importantly, without judgment. So you might feel something, you might not feel something. You might find it hard to connect with one side of your body or one part of your body. Just be curious with that and allow that. And begin to take note, rather than putting a story to it of why that might be, what's happened. Just be curious. So step one is develop a practice of body scanning. Step two is to acknowledge it, to feel it, to connect with your body. If you feel, from my example, if I feel an area of my body that is, whether it's tight or whether it's heavy or whether it's radiating some form of sensation, I'll put my hand on it, I'll connect to it, and then I'll breathe into that area of my body. Again, I won't try and make sense of it cognitively, I'll just try and allow it, and then just allow it to be whatever it needs to be. Breathing into it, put my hand on my body and breathe into that hand, using my hand as feedback to help myself locate that part of me. Being curious with that and being curious with what's coming up and the situations that arise is really important. Discussed before the idea that our brains are turning the feelings within our body into emotions. And so, why is there a part of your body that flares up when you feel anger? Is there a part of your body that flares up when you feel undervalued or you feel hurt? Be curious with that. And if you start to locate that, allow it to be. And for me, I use my hand on a certain area and I'll breathe into my hand and breathe into that space. My hand kind of allows me to pinpoint a bit more of a more accurate location. So step three is to use motion, is to use breath, and to use sound. Now if this is new to you, this might sound, you might feel strange by doing it. I link to practices like ecstatic dance, to more transformational breath work. In the breathwork sessions, the workshops that I lead, we're using breath, we're using something called toning. And so with a controlled exhale, rather than just breathing out through your mouth or nose, I'm adding a tone to it. So a variety of tones to express noise, to express it out. In a home practice, when you're first starting off, play around with humming, play around with moving, whether you're doing maybe some light yoga, some light movement. Even if you're on your hands and knees and just moving back and forth. With your exhale, just practice on just making some humming, some sounds, even to put a song on and hum to it. And just play around with the depth of that, with the volume of that, and with the intensity of that, and see how it makes you feel. It might sound something that will make you uncomfortable to start with, but I can tell you how powerful these practices are when you become to connect with your body and connect with what works for your body. It'll just open the doors to a new experience of life in a way that you probably can't see right now. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you go with that. So remember, step one is developing your awareness of your internal sense, so body scanning. Step two, allowing what is, acknowledging, locating, and just being with those sensations that you feel. And step three is to begin to express it through movement, through sound, and through breath work. If you want some practices, then there are some more below. There's one 30-minute energy center meditation that's going to bring your awareness into different parts of your body, particularly your energetic body. And that's a guided meditation. The link is below. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing how you go with this. And now I'm going to over to you. What has come up for you for this video? What have you taken away with it? What would you like to see more of? Please comment below. And I want to remind you, if you haven't already, there's a free download for you, the 4 simple steps to self-care. It's really the introduction, the stage 1 of personal mastery is developing a self-care practice. And so in this guide, free guide for you to download, There are video tutorials on how to do mobility to ease chronic pain. There are mindset prompts to enable you to shift into more of a growth mindset. There are 3 nutrition tips to help you alter your nutrition for better health, and you're gonna get the best night's sleep you've had in ages. As well as those, there's a breath practice you're gonna learn, and also you're gonna be introduced to the idea of flow state. So if you've not got it already, just follow the link below and you can download it straight away. Thank you so much again for watching this video. Please share to anyone that you feel will benefit from this, and I'll see you on another episode.